Well, welcome everybody to Church Online at Vortex Church. Today, we're doing Church with Friends. We're so thankful to get to spend a few moments with you this Sunday morning. Now, as we've been doing this for the last few weeks, what feels like to me an eternity for many of you, I know that you're so anxious about what it's going to mean to get back together. We are making those plans right now. What we can tell you is that we know it's only a few short weeks, and for that, we are so thankful. We miss you so much. If you want to get an update on where we are with our plans to be together again, just go to vortexchurch.com/COVID-19, and there you can get an update on kind of where we are with our plans as we move forward. Now today, as we kind of gather together, let me just remind you, let's kind of put the service for yourself on the biggest screen that you have. I mean, if that's a computer, do it there. If it's where you would watch normally your football games, maybe on the big screen in the living room, put it there. You can watch this on YouTube, you can watch it on Facebook, whatever you need to do to get it in the most visible spot in the room, simply to minimize distractions. Why? Because we are all distractible. All of us got some version of ADD or something like that. Anything happens around the room, and what happens? Our attention kind of gravitates to that, which is why we tell you often, not just watch it on the big screen, but then log on and interact on your phone or on a smaller screen. It gives you a chance to chat. So take a moment right now as you log in into the chat feature on Facebook or our online campus and just say hi to your friends that are joining you today online. Now, we are so thankful to get to do that. So as we do this today, we want to just focus on the relationships that are there, focus on what the Lord has for us to do. And really, as we do that, we believe that God is going to speak to us today. So minimize the distractions, allow this moment to be sacred, focus your heart, focus your attention on God. Now, as we get ready to kind of move into worship today, I just want to thank you. You guys have been so generous during this season. It's really hard to imagine 3 months ago that we would enter into a season where, as a church, we would not meet face-to-face for 3 months. I mean, realistically, if you would have told me that 3 months ago or at the beginning of 2020, I wouldn't have believed you. But here we are, 3 months later, and here we are online. We're able to do this because there are people like you who believe in what's happening at Vortex, and they want to invest in it. Because you give, our healthcare workers locally have been fed. Because you live, or because you give, they're locally, thousands of families have been fed locally, thousands of meals given away locally. Because you give, we're training the next wave of church planters that are coming out of the network that we're a part of, the ARC. We're able to give and fund and resource them because you give. There are children in Honduras today that are eating a warm meal simply because you give. Our church is not bankrolled by one person who's writing big checks or by an organization that's kind of underwriting what we do. We can do what we do because there are people like you. So we want to encourage you, pray about giving. You can give online at give.vortexchurch.com. We'd encourage you, get online, give, find a way to maybe create recurring giving if your income is kind of standard and repeats itself. It's an easy way to make sure that we don't neglect being faithful with the resources that we've been blessed with. We're so thankful because you've given. So much has happened in the life of our church in this season, and we can't wait to get back together in just a few weeks and share that with you. Now, as we get ready to worship today, let's prepare our hearts as we watch this video.
every circumstance. I believe that you are my fortress. You are my portion. You are my hiding place. I believe you are the way, the truth, the life. Oh, I believe you are the way, the truth, the life. Oh, I believe every blessing, through every promise, through every breath I take. Oh, I believe that you are provider, you are protector, you are the one I love. Oh, I believe you are the way, the truth, the life. Oh, I believe you are the way, the truth, the life. Oh, I believe you are. It's a new horizon, and I'm set on you, and you meet me here today with mercies that I knew. Yeah, all my fears and doubts, they can all come true, because they can't stay long when I believe you are the way, the truth, the life. Oh, I believe you are the way, the truth, the life. Oh, I believe you are. I believe you are. Yeah.
Well, for the last few weeks, we've been talking about friendship. I don't think there's anything that perhaps is more important in life that may add to the texture of our experience than friends. We need to think about that moment in Genesis when God looked over Adam in Genesis 2 and said, it's not good for him to be alone. It's important to remember that's before sin. And God pronounced that there's a problem. You're isolated. You're alone. We weren't created to be that way. In Genesis chapter 1, the Trinity, God the Father, the Holy Spirit, and the Son said to each other, let us make man in our image. We are designed to live in community. The image of God in us wants to be in relationship with others. And so today I want to talk about what it would take for us to have healthy friendships, but to carry them on throughout the span of our lives. But as we get into that, I want you to think about this when it comes to friendships, that every relationship has a context. Every single relationship has a context. I noticed this when I was in school. I was graduating from high school, and there were all these friends that I saw every single day. I mean, we ate lunch together. We were in class together. We saw each other and gave high fives in the hall. And then was just a few weeks after that, I remember thinking, I haven't seen this person and this person and this person. And for some of them, it was years before I would see them again. For some of them, I haven't even seen them, and it's been 20 years. Why? Because we had a context. Our context for our friendship wasn't that our families were friends or that we lived in the same neighborhood. The context was we went to the same school. Every relationship has a context. You may have work friends, you may have neighborhood friends, you may have friends that live in the city that you live in right now. Have you ever noticed that sometimes when those contexts change, that we sometimes don't carry a friend to the next season of life? Maybe you change jobs and you remember that person, you loved them, you shared every day with them, you talked to them regularly, but it's been years since you saw them or were able to catch up with them. Maybe the same thing happened with somebody from the last community that you lived in, the last neighborhood that you lived in, and you moved, and after you moved and that context changed, it was hard to keep that relationship. It's hard for a friendship to outlast a change in context. It is. It's hard. And for many of us, those are hard points in our lives where a lot of our friends are left behind and we walk into new friendships. And while there are some friendships that only last for a season, I believe that there are friends that we literally love each other. We care about each other. We want the best for each other. And in that, those are friends that we need to carry through our entire lives, because those are friends that add a whole lot to our lives. I believe that with love as our context, friendships can indeed last a lifetime. That love can be the context. It's no longer the context of our relationship is the place that we work, the neighborhood that we live in. It is instead that we love each other. I love you, you love me. We're a happy family, right? We get to that point where there is such a bond in our relationship that it itself becomes the context. Now, I just need to remind you when we talk about love that no person will ever deserve love or earn love. That's not the way love works. As a matter of fact, to love somebody, you have to be willing to love them when they're at their worst, when they're at their most challenging, when they're the most difficult. We have to be willing to walk through difficult and challenging seasons. If you're going to have friends that last a lifetime, you're going to go through some seasons where it's going to be challenging, where there's going to be the potential to be offended, where there's going to be the potential to be hurt, but instead, we learn to navigate it with grace and mercy. I think that's what love looks like. Love is the gift of grace and mercy. Grace being unmerited favor, mercy being the impartation of not having to experience the punishment that you might rightly deserve because of something that you've done. Grace and mercy might be easy to think about those as being the two sides of the same coin that we would call love. That's what love looks like. And that's the kind of love that must be the context for a friendship that's going to last for a lifetime. Now, today I've invited some of my friends to be with us, and I'm going to ask them some questions because they're all in very different stages of their lives, and I want them to kind of give us some wisdom when it comes to how do you create, cultivate, and sustain healthy relationships at different seasons. So Eli, you were 7 years old when we planted Vortex Church. You were approximately 3.5 feet tall. And now you are almost 7 foot tall, and you're going to be a sophomore at West Stanley High School this year. And you're one of our leaders in our student ministry. I've been so proud of the young man that you've grown up to be. And so I want to ask you this question. What's it take to create healthy friendships as a teenager?
Yeah, so I think something really important to achieve healthy friendships as teenagers is to be authentic. And one thing I can say about teenagers is that we love social media so much. And through social media, it's really easy to hide behind a screen and to pretend to be someone we're not. So I think it's really important that we can get together with our friends in person, face to face, call them, and have those conversations, those meaningful conversations where we can just talk. And something else that I think is a very big part of being authentic is being honest. We need to be open with our friends about things, and that can be really hard to do if you're just sending Snapchats and text messages. We need to be open and talk about things about our faith, because as Christians, we're called to push each other to become better people and grow through our relationship in Christ. And something that I've had to learn a lot recently is how to be non-judgmental. It's really easy when you're on social media. You can hide behind that screen and be whoever you want and attack whoever you want. But we're all different, and God created us to be different. And as Kevin said earlier, we need to choose love over hate. And lastly, we need to support our friends in decisions that they make, whether it's something that we might not want for them or we might not think is the best for them. We need to let go of our control and our jealousy and support them if it's something that especially pushes them to become better people and especially a better person in Christ.
Yeah, I love the word authentic. I love the word authentic. I think that when we think of the world that we live in right now, it's really easy to try to cultivate friendships that aren't authentic. So the first thing I'm going to give you today, if you're going to build relationships that are going to last a lifetime, number one, create authentic connection. As we go through this today, I'm going to take you to look at a friendship, one of my favorite friendships in the scriptures. It comes between two unlikely characters, Jonathan, who is the son of King Saul, and David, who has been uniquely appointed by the prophet Samuel to be the next king. You know, David shows up on the scene for most people when he shows up to the front lines to kill Goliath. This massive warrior has called out the army of Israel for many days now. And David shows up and is offended by the things he's saying about his God and the God of Israel. And he takes it personally. He steps in to kind of defend the honor of his God. And as he does, he wins the battle. Israel is led into a mighty victory. And he gets to meet King Saul. He's kind of ushered in to spend some time with the king right after that. And this is the first time he meets Jonathan. You see it happen in 1 Kings chapter 18, where the scriptures record, after David had finished talking with Saul, he met Jonathan, the king's son. There was an immediate bond between them, for Jonathan loved David. From that day on, Saul kept David with him and wouldn't let him return home. And Jonathan made a solemn pact with David because he loved him as he loved himself. Jonathan sealed that pact by taking off his robe and giving it to David, together with his tunic, sword, bow, and belt. You know, you see something happen right there. It's kind of like friendship at first sight between Jonathan and David. They immediately had a bond that was there. And it wasn't just something that was superficial. We get to see, as this relationship unfolds, that there was a significant bond between these two guys. They loved each other. They cared about each other. They were selfless with each other. And you see in this moment that from the very beginning that they chose to have an authentic connection. You know, authenticity is reflected in our words and our actions. A lot of times we might say something but then do something else. But when we're looking for authenticity, it's reflected in both of those. It's what we say and then what we do married together that creates authenticity in our lives. And you see that in Jonathan. Jonathan made a pact with David. We're going to be friends. I'm going to take care of you. But then he sealed the pact, and he gave him the kind of token garment that would have represented this level of commitment. We are not just, I'm not just saying this. I'm not just, I'm going to demonstrate that I mean what I'm saying. It's so important to cultivate authentic connection. I love listening to Eli answer that. I think that it's important to understand that in the world that we live in today, especially right now, as many of us have been sheltering in place or socially distancing, it is easy to hide behind a screen. It's really easy. But I want you to be reminded of this simple truth for friendships. Relationships work best when you're face to face, not thumbs to thumbs. Sometimes there are conversations that just need to happen face to face. Sometimes it's not a conversation. Sometimes we just need to spend time together. I miss you. I haven't seen you. How are you doing? And a text message just isn't enough. Sometimes it's impossible to encourage somebody the way that God's called you to by just sending a simple emoji over text. We've got to get face to face and not live out our relationships thumbs to thumbs. You know, Gina, as I've watched you navigate your adult life, you're my sister. I've known you since you were born, which is an amazing, I can't say that for everybody in the room, but I can say that to you. And I have watched you as an adult really navigate friendships in such a healthy way. I've watched you take really significant leaps in life and always carrying those friendships forward. So if I were going to ask you this question, I want you to answer this for us. What's it take to sustain healthy friendships as a single adult?
I really think that it takes pursuing those relationships, having the mind that it takes action and you have to want to go out and do it. If we don't pursue those friendships in our adulthood, we sit back and continue to wait, at times feeling lonely, and at sometimes kind of falling into some unhealthy relationships. But I think as we think about pursuing relationships and healthy friendships, it's also important to realize that friendships aren't balance sheets. It's not a you do this for me and then I do this for you. It's about what I can do to love you, because that breeds those life-giving friendships that we talk about. And as I've moved from state to state or cities to cities in my adult life, I think that it takes that desire to continue to pursue those friendships in order to make them sustain.
You know, after listening to Gina's answer to that question this week, I realized the second thing that you must do if you're going to have a friend and keep them and have a life-giving relationship for really a lifetime, and it's this, that you have to take personal responsibility. You have to take personal responsibility. I love what she said. You can't have a balance sheet in a friendship. And it's so true. Love, as the scripture says, keeps no records. It doesn't keep records of rights and wrong, what you did, what I did. That's not the way love works. Love doesn't keep a scorecard. And I think that sometimes we need to realize that taking personal responsibility realizes that I might see something, I might be able to do something that you can't. And because I see it, because I see that there's been some time that we haven't talked, because I see that we might need to hang out, I see that I could come over and help your family, I see that I need to be the person to take personal responsibility and step up and do what I can. I love this moment that happens in the life of Jonathan and David's friendship. It happens in 1 Samuel 19. And in this moment, like, there's a growing tension that's happening between Saul, Jonathan's dad, and David. In this moment, there's this tension that's kind of developing between them two. And Jonathan is going to be in a unique moment. He can do something about it. And because he can, he does. Look at this. The next morning, Jonathan spoke with his father about David, saying many good things about him. The king must not sin against his servant David, Jonathan said. He's never done anything to harm you. He's always helped you in any way that he could. Have you forgotten about the time he risked his life to kill the Philistine giant and how the Lord brought a great victory to all of Israel as a result? You were certainly happy about it when it was about it then. Why should you murder an innocent man like David? There is no reason for it at all. So Saul listened to Jonathan and vowed, as surely as the Lord lives, David will not be killed. Afterwards, Jonathan called David and told him what had happened. Then he brought David to Saul, and David served in the court of the king, as before. See, Jonathan was in that unique position. He had a relationship with his father, and he had a relationship with his friend. And because of that, he was able to do something that nobody else could do. He took personal responsibility for something that wasn't necessarily his responsibility. I see this in this moment, and this is something that we need to kind of embrace if we're ever going to have healthy friendships, and this, that you can wait and complain, or you can be a part of the solution. Right now, I think that we just need to embrace that in life in general. There are a lot of us on the sidelines of life complaining about things that you could be a part of the solution for. We can wait. We can not take personal responsibility. We can deflect that to other people, and we can complain, or you and I can step up and be a part of the solution. You know, in friendships, it works that way. You can wait, complain, and what happens? there's distance. Or you can take personal responsibility and you can sustain a life-giving friendship throughout your life. You know, there's another stage that kind of comes as you begin maybe to grow in life, and many of us have been there or are there, and kind of that's where me and Brian are. We both have 3 kids, all very young. And so, Brian, I love the way that you and Jen do life. You are incredible friends. You've been incredible friends to Amanda and I, and so many people in our church. I love you guys. You're incredible leaders. And I was just thinking about you guys as I was preparing this. And so I want to ask you this question. What's it take to maintain healthy friendships when you have a family?
I think, for me and Jen and our kids, what we've really learned as we've grown our family through the years is to approach relationships with humility and be humble. And it's not something that just Jen and I try to work on for ourselves, but it's something that we try to teach our kids and instill in them because we think it's important through all phases of life, just to approach a relationship with humility and staying humble. We believe that opens up the door for a deeper connection. And for like other parents, when I'm approaching other parents, I know God called me to lead my family and be a dad to my kids, but he didn't call me to be a dad to other people's kids.
Right.
And so I cannot have a critical eye and then have a critical heart for their parenting style, right? I have to be humble and have some humility, and ultimately I can learn from them. I mean, my oldest son's 8, right? He's 8 years old, so I've never raised an 8-year-old until now, but a lot of my friends have. So if I have some humility in those relationships, maybe I can gain some knowledge and what to do. But one thing that we struggle with in our household, and you'll know this, is we think our house has to be perfect, right? We think if we're inviting somebody over, whether it be family or anybody, we think everything has to be clean. My wife says the table has to wink at her, and so we daily work on some humility with that. Like, we got 3 kids, 3 boys. You don't know when a kid is going to go to the bathroom, and hopefully they walk back out fully clothed.
Hopefully.
But you just don't know. You don't know what's happened, and life can be messy. But if we stay humble, I think it allows us to connect with others.
Yeah, if you need to be humbled, we both have 3-year-old boys, right? If you need to be humbled, just try to parent a 3-year-old boy while you're having a dinner party. It's going to humble you real quick. You know, I think that's a great principle. If you're going to carry a friend through life, you've got to stay humble. You've got to stay humble. You know, think about that tension of pride and humility. You know, pride is going to eventually turn the scope of your heart back to yourself. It's going to continually redirect the thoughts, emotions, the energy in your life back to you. But humility lets us see things clearly. And there's this beautiful moment in the life of Jonathan and David. This happens as the tension between Jonathan's dad, Saul, and David begins to escalate. And if you know the story, it's going to end up with David having to run and flee and hide and try not to get killed. And Saul's going to pursue him and chase him and do everything to hunt him down. And there's this moment when they come face to face. It's one of the last times they speak. In 1 Samuel 20, beginning in verse 3, it says this: Then David took an oath before Jonathan. Your father knows perfectly well about our friendship. So he said to him, I won't tell Jonathan. Why should I hurt him? But I swear to you that I'm only a step away from death. I swear it by the Lord and by your own soul. He's trying to convince Jonathan that, you know what, I'm telling you, you may not know it, but your dad is trying to kill me. Your dad is trying to kill me. So think about that moment. Think about that moment. In this moment, Jonathan is the prince. In everybody's eye, Jonathan is the person who has the rightful claim to the throne of Israel. He should be, in the commoner's perspective, he should be the next king. He's the son of the king. But he loved David more, you might even say, than he loved himself. Look at his response. Tell me what I can do to help you. That's the prince
speaking to a shepherd. He didn't consider his position to be above. No, he took the attitude of a servant and said, tell me, David, what can I do? The story would then begin to unfold, and it gets pretty ugly as they begin to find out that Saul indeed is planning to kill David. And so in the last moment that Jonathan and David see each other at the end of 1 Samuel 20, there's this beautiful moment where we see that humility comes. And it shows us why humility is so important, because we need to understand that the opposite of humility is pride, and pride kills, but humility gives life. Pride will choke your relationships. It will choke your connection. It will keep you isolated and alone, but humility will give life to your friendships, your relationships, your marriage. It will bring life to your relationship with the Lord. And there's this moment where you see this. It's Jonathan speaking to David, and it's going to be the last time they talk. So at last, Jonathan said to David, go in peace, for we have sworn loyalty to each other in the Lord's name. The Lord is a witness of the bond between us and our children forever. Then David left, and Jonathan returned to his town. Jonathan said something that you can't say if you're carrying pride. Jonathan said, go in peace. Go in peace. You can't speak peace when your heart is filled with pride. But because Jonathan had carried an attitude of humility with David, he could speak peace into a moment that was anything but peaceful. And I want you to notice what happened in that moment. He said, David, this is not just about us. The bond that we share goes far beyond this moment. This is what friendship does. Friendship alters the trajectory of families. And he said, listen, I want you to see this. May what's happened here carry on in our lives and in the lives of our children. If you don't know what happened after this, Jonathan is going to be killed in battle. His dad, Saul, is eventually going to be killed in battle as well. And David is positioned uniquely at that moment to become the next king of Israel. And like most transitions of power in those days, the family of Saul and his son, they were obliterated. They were killed. Not because of something that David asked, but just because of kind of the culture that they lived in. So David becomes king of Israel. And he remembers that moment with his friend. And he calls in his aides and he says, hey, tell me, are there any children left of my friend Jonathan? I want to be able to show to them the kindness that was shown to me. And his aides went and looked, and they could only find one. And they came back and reported, we found one son of Jonathan that remains. His name is Mephibosheth. He's a cripple. He's homeless and living as a beggar. His feet were deformed when he was born. And because of that, likely when the overthrow happened, he was never seen as a threat, so he wasn't killed. So David dispatched his people and said, go get him, bring him in here. And from this moment on, he will live as a child in the house of his father, a son in the house of the king. That's what friendship does. So in John 15, when Jesus said, I no longer call you servants, I call you friends, just like beggars who have been lost to our own ways, who were never on our own going to be good enough to deserve or earn the love of the Father. Jesus was dispatched to bring us back into the family of God. Every day that David was king, a crippled boy was ushered down the hall to eat with his family. We are invited to be a part of the family of God. None of us earn it. As a matter of fact, do you remember what I said about love? Love is the gift of grace and mercy. It's not something we earn. It's not something we deserve. And today, I want you to carry those kind of friendships throughout your life. But more than that, I want you to experience the kind of friendship that's being offered to you in the person of Jesus. Can we take a moment right now and pray? God, we just come before you. We thank you so much that you are a good and loving God. God, we know that because of your mercy, because of who you are, we don't suffer under the weight of our sin. Because of your grace, we have been given unmerited favor. We have been granted a relationship that we do not deserve. We could never earn it. So God, help us today to step into the reality of a friendship with our Creator. And help that friendship, the way that we are loved and we get to love you, help that to become the template for the way that we love others. God, help us to build an authentic connection with you. God, help us to take personal responsibility for taking the next steps spiritually and continuing to develop and grow in our walk. And God, help us to stay humble so that we know that this life is not about us. It is always about you. So look at me. Look at me real quick. If you're watching right now, and maybe in this moment you're like, you know, I feel a little bit like the beggar. I feel unworthy. I feel broken. I feel lost. I feel a million miles away from anything that is meaningful or helpful or hopeful. I want you to understand that God sent his son Jesus to come after you so that you could be made right with him. All you need to do is just say yes. All you need to do is surrender to what God is doing in your heart right now. If you're at our online campus, you're going to see a button come up right now. It's going to invite you to raise your hand just to say, that's me. I surrender. If you're at one of our streaming platforms today, take a moment right now. Just type it out in the chat. Just say, I surrender. If you want to, we'd love to be able to connect with you today. You can text just the simple phrase, I choose. I choose Jesus. ICHOOSE. I choose. Text that into 97000. And if you do that, we get to follow up and pray with you and encourage you as you begin to take those next steps of following Jesus. We love you. We are so thankful for what God is doing in your heart right now. And as we continue to kind of lean into that, I want you to take a moment right now and let's continue kind of in a worshipful attitude. Let's continue to pray and ask God to speak to us as we watch this video.
Jesus said, "This is the first and greatest commandment. Love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And the second is like it. Love others as you love yourself." So the question is, do you love? I mean, do you really live the definition of love? Are you patient? Are you kind? Do you celebrate in the blessings of others? Are you humble? Have you died to self? Are you slow to anger? Do you keep no record of wrongs? Do you always protect, always trust, always hope, always persevere? This is what it means to love, the way God intended. So the question remains, do you love?
Well, hey, everybody. It has been so good to spend this time with you today. We're so thankful for a few moments that we get with you to invest in your life. We believe in you. We love you. We believe that God is doing something in this season, though it may be difficult. He's with you. He's with you. You're not alone. You're not left just to your own devices. In this season, no, we're here for you. We're here for you. We love you. We've been praying for you. We've been believing God to do something amazing in your life. But not just that, the Lord himself is with you. Isn't it good to know that we're never alone, that we can live in the eternal presence of God? And lastly, as we get ready to go today, I just want to remind you of one simple thing we've been saying. It's so important for us to remember this. In a time where it feels like fear and doubt and insecurities run rampant in the world that we live in, God's got you and God's got this. We love you so much, and we'll see you back next week.